Warning, the following presentation is intended for mature audiences and it contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and strong language. This podcast represents the opinions of the hosts and their guests, and every effort is made to ensure that the information is accurate. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, fellow armchair detectives. I'm your host, Ashleigh.
And I'm your host, Tamlyn Rossouw.
And this is Just in Crime. Join us as we explore the issue of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa
by exploring the victims and their stories.
January 2018. It's a typical beautiful day for the people of New Hanavor. Surrounded by the lush sugarcane fields and the beautiful scenery, a farmer and his grandson decide to go on a fishing trip. What was supposed to be a day filled with happiness and creating new memories soon became a horror story that no one would ever forget. As they would make their way along the road adjacent to the sugarcane fields, they would see the body of a 20-year-old female burned so badly that all you could see was the shiny silver nail polish on her hands and feet. This is the case of Siam Lee. So Siam Lee was born in Hong Kong in 1997 to her mother, Carmen Lee, who was a sex worker, and her father, who was apparently a wealthy businessman from Johannesburg. Unfortunately, when Siam was 5, her father passed away. I've read some articles that said he was murdered in a home invasion gone wrong in Johannesburg, but I cannot confirm that this is 100% true. Unfortunately, though, because of this, her and her mother had decided to move back to South Africa and set up their new life in Durban. This was really difficult for both of them as they both loved Hong Kong, and as the years went on, they both spoke to one another and said that they would definitely move back.
Why couldn't they move back, though?
Well, I assume it's because they were living off the father's money and wealth. And as I mentioned before, her mother is a sex worker and Hong Kong is very expensive. So I don't know how much sex workers make, but I'm pretty sure it's out of the price range to live in Hong Kong. So once they were settled in South Africa, Siam enrolled in Crawford College, Lelusha, which is a really nice private school. And I went to a private school, but Crawford is very, very nice. It's a very, very expensive private school. And I think the only reason she was able to afford going to such an expensive school is because her deceased father had basically set up a trust fund for her, which was, great for her. And I can imagine that she had a pretty cool high school experience. However, once she matriculated, life kind of got flipped on its head, and suddenly there were some legal issues that came into play, and her trust fund was immediately stopped. This obviously put great pressure on her to start making money in order to make a life for herself, and so she started working a variety of jobs, from waitressing to bartending. At one point, she was a promoter. She also sold pool chemicals for a bit. But unlike overseas, in Australia, jobs like this don't really make a lot of money. In fact, I don't even think it meets the minimum wage. It's extremely challenging to live off a salary like that unless you're literally living hand to mouth. So Siam starts to branch out and look into other industries and for any opportunities that may arise. And she eventually starts offering sensual massages on an adult site called Red Velvet. At this point, I feel like people are going to gasp and they're going to kind of look down at her choice. But honestly, grow up. It's not even that drastic of a jump. Over the last couple of years, I feel like it's evident that sex work, and I use this term loosely, can make a lot of money. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're sleeping with someone. Sex work can also include things like OnlyFans, like giving sensual massages. So, if she wanted to give sensual massages and she's comfortable with it and she was of age, and I guess she felt pretty safe. You do what you gotta do, hey? You gotta make that cash. It was also very easy for her to get into this industry. As I mentioned previously, her mother was a sex worker and she basically guided her through like the website and they eventually teamed up. So I just want to clarify. I'm not exactly sure what this means, but from what I gathered, basically her mom would promote her daughter like under her channel so that she'd get extra exposure. It wasn't like a weird mother-daughter duo thing. And I also just want to clarify that Siam was not a prostitute and she actually had no intention of ever becoming one. She worked strictly with sensual massages, and this was basically just a means to an end until she could get her trust fund like reinstated, or she was able to save up and go and study teaching at like a university. But until then, this is what she had to do. So, fast forward to October 2017. Siam has been working under the Red Velvet website for a couple of months now, and it basically had a pretty big client base. And I guess we can assume at this point she felt really comfortable and really safe in her work, which, I mean, we should all feel. She was operating from a 6-bedroom house that was being used as a brothel on Margaret Mayertim Avenue, which is located in Durban North. Apparently, this is a nice area. A few months into the job, though, Siam would meet Philani Ntuli, a client who had made a booking with her. So I'm just going to pause the story for like 2.5 seconds, just so I can paint a better picture of who this man is. So, Philani Ntuli is a 30-year-old businessman. He's like really well-groomed and indulges in like super expensive brands. And like, dude, this is gonna sound really weird, but apparently like everyone said like he smelled really, really good. Like he wore expensive colognes and aftershave, and yeah, he smelled nice. He was also like a very well-educated man, and he had run pretty successful businesses under his name. I tried to understand what these businesses are, but it kind of went over my head. But it sounds fancy. It sounds very, very impressive. So, as I mentioned before, Philani pulled up to the brothel for his appointment with Siam, and I want you to take a note of this. He was driving a Mercedes-Benz Vienna. So, for those of you who don't know cars very well, much like myself, the only way that I can describe it is it looks like a big unsliced loaf of bread, just obviously black and like in car form.
So basically, it's like, you know, like the Uber vans?
Yeah, it's exactly like that, just like uglier.
Yes.
Like it's a very, very ugly car. No tea, no shade to anyone who drives it, but yeah, not for me. Off the bat, nothing weird happens at the appointment, and she gives him the massage and they go their separate ways. He then later sent her a message and asked her if she would like to go and have dinner with him. She agrees and tells him to pick her up at her house. When she arrived, Siam's mom came out to meet him and they made small talk. And yeah, she basically just asked, you know, the normal questions that all parents ask, like, who are you? What's your name? Where are you taking my daughter? What time are you going to be back? What do you do? Normal questions. Siam's mom described him as being like a very proud man, and he had apparently a massive grin just from ear to ear. But all around, he appeared to be just a very normal guy. The two then went on their way and they returned home at 10 p.m. When she arrived home, Siam went upstairs to basically update her mother about the date. And when she got there, she was apparently like, oh my gosh, mom, I don't want to see that man again. He's really weird. He's really creepy.
Oh my gosh, really?
Like, yeah, I think it was just one of those things where you go on like a date and it's like, it's just such a big miss. The person's just weird. As she said, they're creepy. You're just not comfortable. You don't want to do it again. She still, however, saw him and he had become a regular client for her. Now, I'm not sure where this happened, like in their relationship, but Philani was said to have lent Siam 50,000 Rand that he now wanted back.
I don't know about you, but that's a very big lend.
Oh, yeah, dude. Like, I am never, ever, ever gonna have 50,000 Rand to lend anyone, so don't ask me. And I mean, let alone someone who barely likes me. And I mean, I think he knew this, and this is kind of why he was getting impatient about the money. He knew he had no chance with her and kind of was like, I need this money back. I gave it to you because I liked you, but now you don't like me, so sorry. But like, obviously, Siam isn't particularly wealthy, and she came up with like a lot of excuses and wasn't able to come up with the money. And I guess this caused some type of tension between the two. So fast forward again to New Year's Eve. Siam and her mom went to a popular trance music festival near Durban. After the celebration, Siam returned to work. On the 4th of January, Felani, driving a black Mercedes-Benz Vienna, arrived at the brothel at 4 p.m. Apparently, no one saw anything suspicious, but one person did say that they saw Siam standing barefoot talking to a black male. No one saw the gun and the handcuffs that he was carrying, and soon after entering, he stormed into Siam's room and kidnapped her and forced her into his vehicle. Obviously, in the heat of the moment, he speeds away. And this is actually to his detriment because I'm not even joking. About 200 meters from the location, which is actually like a literal 2 minutes, he meets up with an accident. Obviously, he can't stop and sort out the issue because he's just like kidnapped someone, and so he speeds away. The driver, who is clearly enraged and might have a little bit of anger issues, decides to chase after the Mercedes-Benz and rams into the back of it in like hopes of stopping it. Unfortunately, though, he still manages to get away. Felani drives about 20 minutes away from the brothel to a house in Shongweni where he kept Siam for a while. While we don't know what exactly happened inside, we suspect that he may have raped her several times. Just under 24 hours later, under the cover of the night, Felani moved Siam to a new location by some lush sugarcane fields in New Hanavor. While we cannot know for sure, we know and we assume that she is still alive at this point. He then dumped her body in the field and set her alight. From her disappearance, there was immediate concern from like all police officers and security units, and they basically eventually reached out to the help of a private investigator named Brad Nathanson. They started to look for all possible leads. Keep in mind that in most cases, unless you have a body or there is a known homicide, you still have to treat it as if the person's alive and look at all options, and that's exactly what they did. The search in itself was quite extensive, and shortly after they started looking, Nathanson received a call from another police officer that was in New Hanavor. He told him that he was standing over Siam's body. A farmer from the area and his grandson had gone out to fish when they came across her. She was lying in what could be described as a dying swan position, her one arm draped over her face, and that being the only part of her body that wasn't burnt beyond recognition. There was a massive hole where her face would have been, and all her teeth were missing. The only way that people were able to identify her was by the glittery silver nail polish on her fingers and toes. Upon further investigation, they concluded that 90% of her body was burnt and she was killed by a hemorrhage to the brain. When Nathanson heard of this terrible account, he fell to his knees on his veranda and prayed to God that he would be the one to arrest the man who had committed this terrible crime. The investigation started immediately, and Nathanson started to look at every possible lead. Eventually, this paid off, and they were eventually able to make a massive breakthrough in the case. Nathanson was eventually contacted and received information from a witness whose car had been hit by a black Mercedes-Benz Vienna, the exact same kind that everyone saw at the brothel that day. This was essentially the tipping point for the investigation, and the police contacted all insurance companies to see if anyone had put in a claim for a car that was involved in that type of accident, and luckily enough, someone did. No one other than Felani and Tuli. Nathanson then managed to track the car back to the address in Shongweni, and once he arrived there, he contacted the police. The police then arrived and impounded the car. They all waited patiently for Felani to arrive. When Felani arrived, he opened the garage door and he stood in shock to see that his car was missing. He then made his way to the driver's seat of the car that he was using at the time and appeared as if he was going to leave the property. However, he was confronted by police who pushed him to the ground, and it was in that moment that Nathanson got exactly what he wanted and arrested him for the kidnapping and murder of Siam Lee.
Before we jump into court proceedings, be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Just in Crime SA for more episodes, case-related content, updates, and other riveting content.
Also, always keep in mind we are not professionals in any of the discussed fields. If you or anyone you know is in danger, you can find resources on our social media pages, or alternatively, you can contact the Gender-Based Violence Command Center at 0800 428 428 or SMS HELP to 31531. So, during his brief court appearance at the Durban High Court in May, the case was adjourned until July for a pre-trial hearing. Ntuli hobbled out of the courtroom on crutches. His demeanor and the way he carried himself stood out to a lot of people who watched. This did not seem like someone who was scared or even remorseful about what had taken place. Instead, what they saw was a very happy and very smart businessman who appeared confident despite the gravity of the charges that had been pressed against him. Philani was meant to make his way to trial in July 2019, as I previously mentioned. However, 1 month before he could face charges in the Durban High Court, he passed away from skin cancer. And at the time, he was out on bail and literally had not pleaded in the matter at all. Before his passing, the state said that they had a very strong case against him, and he was facing a wide range of charges from kidnapping, murder, defeating the ends of justice, failing to report a motor vehicle accident, and many more. Upon further investigation, they also found that Ntuli was essentially a serial rapist and had done this many times before. They also had speculation that he had AIDS and a goal of spreading it, but this is not 100% confirmed, and obviously he's not here to defend himself, so don't take that as fact, more speculation. In the case of Siam, though, he essentially did take it a step further than rape, and he did murder her. They suspected that this was due to the fact that he knew that Siam would have gone to the police had she made it out alive, and she would have easily been able to identify him. They also suspected that he may have hoped that by kidnapping Siam, her friends and family might have been able to come up with the 50,000 rand that she allegedly owed him. With all this piling up against him, the state said that they were about 90% sure that he would have been convicted and sentenced. And this is a really big thing in South Africa, as not a lot of cases actually get prosecuted and get sentenced. Our prosecution rate is extremely, extremely low. So this would have been phenomenal. The following statement was made by the state. It's a crying shame that the complainants and Siam will never have a voice in court. The investigating officer, Officer Rajan Govender, and the state worked very hard on this case. We have been robbed of the opportunity to present a compelling case, which we were confident would have been successful. Now, okay, I also had this thought, and I know it's really, really bad, but I know there are people who had the same thought. I immediately was like, he faked his own death and he ran away because, timing is just way too convenient. Way, way too convenient. However, I was wrong. Very rare thing that this happens, me being wrong. But, I was wrong, and they had conducted a fingerprint analysis and then went and confirmed that it was in fact Ntuli, because I feel like the state also may have suspected that he did that, so they just needed to double check that it was actually him. So this just made me really sad, and her mother, who was obviously devastated by this, had stated that if he had been alive and if we had the death penalty in South Africa, that she would have wanted that. She said she wished he had died a really violent death. She said that throughout the whole process, neither him nor his family had been gracious enough to act kindly towards her and would call her names throughout the whole process. And all around, it sounds like her experience with this has just been a really, really tough time. She has since moved out of their one-room apartment and moved to Bloemfontein. The case has been struck off the roll due to the accused's death, and while many things have changed, there is one thing that seems to have remained the same: the place where she passed away. The ground where she lay was so badly burnt that nothing was ever able to grow again. And since then, it will act as a constant reminder of the violent acts that took place behind the beautiful scenery of the lush sugarcane fields.
Dude, that is absolutely heartbreaking. And I think it's crazy that sex work is like still criminalized in South Africa for like both parties involved. Like I actually read a stat just the other day, and it said that between 2014 and 2017, 118 female sex workers died, and 55% of these deaths were as a result of murder. And these murders included methods like using poison, multiple gunshot wounds, stabbing, strangulation, and even being pushed out of a moving car. Perpetrators of violence include clients, intimate non-commercial partners, and the general public. Sex work I really don't think it should be criminalized because this makes women vulnerable and it encourages human trafficking. South Africa is grappling with high levels of violence against women, with sexual assault and intimate partner violence contributing to the increased risks for HIV infections. A lot of people are actually trying to make the conversation about sex workers' deaths and sex worker violence into the general gender-based violence and femicide conversation.
And I think it actually has full right to be there. And it actually forms a massive, massive part of the issue. Dude, I think the reason this case got as much attention as it did, and it wasn't a particularly massive case like Lee Matthews or like Uyunene Marijuana, but it got more attention than most cases do. And the main reason behind this is because it basically screamed what women all over the country have been screaming for years. Sex workers are being raped and killed at a very severe rate, and no one cares, solely based on the fact that they have chosen to work in a less conservative line of work. We literally don't know other people's stories. We don't know what they have to do. So we don't have a right to judge what they do for money. And I agree with you, it should be decriminalized. It's ridiculous. And I think there's just a really big stigma attached to the label of sex work. And I think we need to understand that sex work in itself has different industries and different departments. So for example, we can classify both OnlyFans and prostitution as sex works. And both of those are perfectly okay. And you know why? Because it is literally none of our business what other women decide to do with their bodies. It's their choice, and they matter just as much as any other woman who is being murdered in this country.
Dude, I completely agree with you. And just as I guess sort of a trailer, I just want to mention that we will be covering cases that we will be showcasing in the series to come. And these include the Port Elizabeth prostitute killer. And just a little synopsis of the Port Elizabeth prostitute killer. His name was Rian Stander. He murdered 2 sex workers in 2007. Basically, the first victim's throat was cut from ear to ear, and her body was then dumped, and her head was covered by a black plastic bag. And the second victim also had her throat cut, and she was partially dressed. And we'll also be looking at people such as Stuart Wilkin, aka Booty Bood, who's a convicted serial killer who partly preyed on female prostitutes back in the 90s. And then there's South Africa's most famous or infamous rather serial killer, Moses Sithole, aka the ABC killer. So evidently we have very exciting cases coming up in the future, but we have specifically chosen these cases in the hopes to aid in bringing the conversation about violence against sex workers into the gender-based violence and femicide conversation, because those women matter just as much as any other woman matters.
And I think just to kind of conclude this episode and this case, I just want to say this case made me really sad. Number one, because dude, she's really young. She's your age.
Dude,
23.
23,
dude. Well, she would have been 23 now. I think she was only 17 or 18. Well, 18. She must have been 18 because she was working on that site. 18 when she was killed. And I mean, dude, I often think I literally cannot die now. There's so much I have to do.
Exactly.
So that just absolutely breaks my heart. And 2, it was a situation where literally the justice system was about to pull through. He probably would have gotten convicted. And yes, his death was absolutely tragic. And I really am not going to speak badly of the dead. But I think it was sadder for me in terms of like his relation to Siam, because he never had to suffer for the pain he caused her. He never had any repercussions for anything bad he did. And I mean, like everyone could still, how do I say this? Siam's mom isn't going to ever see her again. Like we can deal with if someone dies because they're sick or because there's like natural causes and we get to say goodbye to our loved ones. Siam's mom did not get that. Siam's friends didn't get that. Siam didn't get that. And all in all, I feel like it was just a massive injustice.
Siam died at the hands of another person.
And as we've discussed in previous things, like you have no right to play God and take someone else's life.
Exactly.
And I mean, I guess we can just hope that the following cases that do happen in terms of violence against sex workers or a murder that does take place, that the justice system looks at this case of Siam and sees like this is an issue and we take all these cases as seriously, because then I guess maybe she wouldn't have like died in vain.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out our social media for more episodes, case-related content, and other riveting info.
We'd also like to give a massive shout out to Christian Putter for creating our theme song. Be sure to check out more of his work on Instagram at Christian_Putter.
And then we would also just like to thank Anthony Catano for creating our album art. So be sure to follow him at @Catano on Instagram.
And lastly, we'd like to give a huge shout out to VU Media for helping produce this podcast. Be sure to follow them on Facebook and Insta at VU_Media SA.